So I ran across this article just recently. This was written by Eddie Mock. I'm assuming that's how you pronounce that. And the title of the article is Could Sony Buy EA in Response to Microsoft's Deal for Activision? Analysts weigh in. Well, there's not really anything to weigh in because, as the comments have also reflected here, and really you don't have to read the comments to know this, but Sony simply doesn't have the money to buy a company like EA. They don't have the funds, the extra funds hidden in the savings account to make a big acquisition like what Microsoft has done with ZeniMax Media and Activision Blizzard. They don't have the money to do that. So I'm a bit confused as to why this article even exists and why it was published in the first place. But let's take a look at what's actually in here. The Hollywood Reporter quotes analysts outlining their thoughts on potential acquisition targets, including Electronic Arts. Analysts at the research firm Enders said Sony might see EA as likely to be the favorite for an acquisition, and the price mentions of how EA currently has a market cap of around $37 billion. So Sony might look to buy Ubisoft or Take-Two for a far cheaper price. I don't think Sony has the money to buy any of these fucking companies right here. They don't have the money to invest in EA. They don't have the money to invest in Ubisoft. And I don't even think they have the money to invest in Take-Two. Not to mention, Sony's strategy is very different from Microsoft's. I'm not really sure why this article even exists in the first place. Now, it was also stated here that another research company, Handler, has stated that Disney might look to purchase EA, which I believe, that could actually end up happening. Disney has already partnered with EA for some of their recent Star Wars games that's been released over the last few years. So, I mean, that's very much possible. And it also mentions that Disney no longer directly develops games itself, but instead runs a licensing business for video games. Just recently, they've announced some Star Wars games that's being developed by Respawn Entertainment. Like I said, that's very much possible. But as far as Sony buying up anything, they really don't have the market share for this. Just recently, Sony just lost $20 billion due to Microsoft's deal with Activision Blizzard. So how is it that Sony has the money to invest in a large acquisition that's going to cost them several $billion? It really doesn't make much sense. Taking a look at the comments right here. You're right, they need money. They lost $20 billion when their stock dropped to $115 after the Activision buyout announcement. But today, the stock dropped even more to $104 today. Sony has lost 17% of its value. Again, Sony does not have the money to invest in a company like EA or Ubisoft or even Take-Two. I don't believe that to be the case. And another thing is, even if they had the money and even if they were interested in making a huge acquisition like buying a company like EA, Ubisoft, or Take-Two, I don't see how that would actually help them, to be fully honest. That wouldn't really pull in more people to the PlayStation platform. If anything, it would have the opposite effect. If anything, it would alienate people from wanting to jump exclusively to Sony's platform. Because Sony has been doing similar exclusivity deals for a while now, and most of them have not been worth the investment. A perfect example would be Street Fighter V. Sony paid a lot of money to Capcom and made an exclusivity deal to release Street Fighter V exclusively on the PlayStation. Yet when the game actually came out, because Capcom had done fucked the game up behind the scenes, there was nothing but an endless supply of backlash among the player base for various reasons, not limited to a bunch of content that should have been in the game at launch that was completely missing, along with a very sparse base character roster. And it has taken them multiple years in order to get Street Fighter V to a decent level. It's really still not that great of a game at all. They've improved it somewhat over time, but, the damage has already been done. Another deal that kind of backfired on them is the Final Fantasy VII Remake. Well, I already know what some of you are saying. Well, the Final Fantasy VII Remake was a success. Well, yes, it was a success. But if you look at the sales numbers, the game only sold around, what, 4 million copies or something like that, which isn't bad, but for a remake to one of the best-selling games in the Final Fantasy series and the most popular entry by far, it's kind of a waste. Again, I see why Sony, paid for exclusivity for this remake, but at the end of the day, the exclusivity for the Final Fantasy VII remake was temporary. It was never going to be permanent, and Square Enix was never going to allow it to become permanent. I was saying back when Final Fantasy VII Remake, when the game actually came out, that it was eventually going to, come to other platforms. And I was right, as the game was just released recently, over the last month, on PC. And I'm sure eventually it'll make its way to Xbox at some point. Like I said, Sony making exclusivity deals hasn't really worked out for them. And it would be very out of character for them to even attempt a deal like this. Although, like I said before, as I've stated before, I don't believe Sony has the money to invest in any of these large companies.